first one that we have today is James May, and we're delighted to have you here, James. James is from Mind the Product, and his topic is going to be on the business value of product.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.
So, big welcome.
Thank you for the warm welcome. Pandemic obviously got in the way somewhat. It's been about 3 years since I was last in Dublin, so it is absolutely brilliant to be back. As John said, I was one of the co-founders of Mind the Product up until earlier this year when I stepped back as CEO because we exited the business to Pendo. So I spent the last year or so as a roving evangelist for Pendo, talking about the value of product, but also getting to speak to product managers all around the world about some of the different challenges that they face and some of the stresses that they're under. So this one this evening particularly, there's a disconnect I find with product management particularly. As product managers, you are constantly having to answer the what, the who, the why, whereas product leaders are often looking more at the impact and the outcome. But when you get to business leaders, it's always how much. How much is this going to cost me? Or how much is this going to make me? Now, just a quick refresher. My co-founder on Mind the Product, Martin Erickson, put together this diagram way back in, I want to say, 2011-ish. We believe these are the three fundamentals of product management, right? You exist at this intersection. I sometimes say that product management is essentially decision-making as a service. And I think this diagram does a nice job of outlining that. But what I tend to find more often than not is that if product managers have a blind spot, it's the business part. You're great at working with users. You're great at understanding where the problems might be. You love coming up with neat ideas on how you might fix them and then working with engineers and designers to actually bring those things to life. It's amazing. But if there's a blind spot, it's the business. So we're going to talk a little about that. Why? Current economic climate, not great. Not great anywhere, frankly. Doesn't matter in the US, Europe, wherever. Not great. We're seeing stagflation. We're seeing both B2C and B2B businesses struggle with that. We're seeing whether you're VC funded, whether you're bank loan funded, whatever it might be, everybody's getting more conservative. And fundamentally, you've got rising interest as well, adding to the cost of pretty much everything. So as product managers, you are constantly being asked to do more with less. I'm sure pretty much every company right now has slowed down its hiring for this year, right? Put your hand up if your hiring has actually increased this year. Ooh, it's a few. Don't work for them. These guys are spending money, apparently. But there is absolutely a global liquidity crunch going on, and it's hitting people in all kinds of different ways. So that's why we're going to talk about the business aspect a little. So there's a couple of reports that both Mind the Product and Pendo have produced over the course of this year. So I'm going to call on a little bit of data and drop that in as we go. But the one thing I want to highlight particularly is that these reports have been produced in the last 12 months. It's in a period of absolutely insane change. Your customers have changed more in the last 2 years than they have in the last 2 decades. The way we buy our clothes, the way we shop, the way we eat, the way we travel, the way we look after our kids, the way we take care of our pets. Everything has changed in the last 2 years. You probably get less close to your customers than you have in years because we're all remote now and we're working over Zoom. But at the same time, there's more tooling available for product managers than there ever has been. So there are ways that we can access this data and help take that on the right kind of journey. The data I'm going to call on, as I say, was produced in this. So I was originally one of the co-founders of Mind the Product. We worked with Pendo then earlier this year. My superpower? I'm probably the best connected person in product. You don't want to see my LinkedIn, it's ridiculous. But I get to travel all around the place and speak to all these amazing ProductTank organizers and get their stories of what's happening in Singapore versus London or Dublin and how product is built in different ways in different places. So it's great fun. And we're going to talk, as I say, a little bit about being product-led and the value of it. And I don't know if anybody noticed, but there was a huge deal in the design world about 2 weeks ago. And it's kind of rude to talk about product-led and not actually touch on this. Adobe acquired Figma. They went to the dark side. Horrible. For the ridiculously marvelous valuation of 20 billion, which I'm sure Figma investors were incredibly happy about. But fundamentally, Figma is an amazing success story of product-led growth tactics. If this plays, you can see the sequencing loop. And they basically, having built the design tool, they then went to town on the product-led aspects, figuring out how they could polish things like onboarding, how they could really open it up to sharing amongst users. One of the things that Adobe had always struggled with, being locked into the PSD format. And if you look at the revenue curve and the valuation curve, you can see exactly where product-led tactics really started to kick in for Figma. and where everything accelerated. And then they went absolute gangbusters for 2 years and closed that phenomenal 20 billion exit. So that's one example of the business exit, of the business value. And in Figma's experience, they were very much looking at the product-led growth aspects. But product-led is about more than just growth. It touches on a variety of other things too. So we're going to cover a few of those. But first, what do I mean by product-led? Well, firstly, it's having the entire business aligned around the product. So the improved efficiency unlocked by making data-informed decisions become the norm. You're empowering all users across the teams to engage with customers, accelerating that customer journey. You're looking at more data informing roadmap decisions. And I'll put on a little bit of data in here in a minute. We're going to come back to that. But we're looking also, you're actually leveraging the product for the marketing side of things. So things like in-app messaging to drive upsell and cross-sell, moving people from free to premium, but also things like self-guided tours. Many of you will have products where people start paying after a certain amount of time, or where they want to unlock certain features. So the faster you get the customers through that loop, the sooner you're going to unlock their dollars. We're looking at things like absolutely stellar onboarding, really polished, really scalable. Again, getting to that customer value as early as you possibly can. And things like analytics to then drive where you might be able to help your users make the jump. You're spending too long on this page, too long on that page. You get stuck with this, you get stuck with that. This would be a great time to pop up a little bit of help. Not necessarily that Microsoft Mr. Clippy, but I'm sure some of us still miss that one. And then finally, just leaning in, getting closer to that customer. As I said before, they've changed so much in the last couple of years. Getting closer to those customers. Actually capturing the voice of the customer. What problem are they trying to solve? Is it the same as the problem you think you're solving for them? Maybe. How confident are you? Iterating constantly on that experience, not just to deliver the customer's value, but to actually deliver delight so that they become your advocates to their networks. And as I say, using data and the customer to actually inform that roadmap. And I know Janice speaking a little later is going to get a lot more into that detail on the roadmap side of things. So I mentioned earlier, we're going to talk a little about data. In God we trust, all others bring data. This quote goes back years, but it's so applicable in this space. So where do we get that data? Now, becoming truly product-led really does mean putting the product at the heart of the customer experience, and it means really gathering that data from every possible source. And one of the reports that we worked on earlier this year saw this increase in how roadmap decisions are made. Back in 2021, 37% of customers reported that they were using data in roadmap decisions. Fast forward 12 months, that's almost doubled. We're seeing so much more use of that. And we found that leading companies are 6 times more likely than mainstream firms to lead with data when making strategic decisions. When you finally get that data and start to democratize it, it's not just useful to product managers, it's useful to customer success teams, it's useful to engineering teams, it's useful to UX and design teams, which then comes with a caveat. Now you've got all this data, do you think they can use it? Or do you think maybe they need a little bit of your support on that? So one of the things that we're starting to see more of now is product ops teams actually looking to say, how do we provide this data to the rest of the firm, but also enable them to actually make use of it? Now going forwards over the next couple of years, I think there's a few things we're going to see. This harsh economic climate is certainly going to drive some of it. You can see here, this is one idea of the available tooling in the product market at the moment. There are more tools available than ever before, but a lot of them are still point solutions. They just do the one thing. They might do it really well, but they still just do one thing. And as product managers, I'm guessing most of you actually have a significantly more extensive tool stack than that, right? And I suspect what we see over the next year or two is a period of mergers, acquisitions, as some of these firms start to come together. Some will be running out of VC funding. Their runways are going to get short, they're going to get acquired. Others will find that actually there are partnerships that make sense, and they're going to start working a lot more closely with those firms. So we're going to see some change there for sure. Now, as a parting gift from me this evening, before we move on to kind of getting deep into the roadmap side of things, Pendo and Mind the Product worked together earlier this year to put together a product-led workshop. Free thing at the moment. It's 3 hours worth of training to cover all the basics of what product-led really means, not just product-led growth, but also support, churn reduction, onboarding, messaging. So it's a 3-hour course, sign up. It's free for now. It won't be for that long, but I hope it's useful. I'm going to get out of your way and bring up Janet to talk a little bit about the road mapping side of things. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, James, for the warm up and the start here, and thank you so much all for being here. Can everybody hear me? Yeah. Yes. All right. Got to use my big inside voice. All right. So today we're going to be talking about the skinny on lean road mapping and OKRs. What you need to know about it. All right. So, well, you've been introduced to me, I think, twice already today, but hi, I'm Jana. You might know me as one of the founders of Mind the Product, which is the big community of product people and, you know, what brings you all here today under the ProductTank banner. And you also might know me as the founder of ProdPad, which is product management software. So it's tools that help you manage your OKRs, your roadmaps, your ideas and your experiments and all the feedback that you're hearing to make sure that you're mapping it all out and making the right decisions and not wasting time building the wrong stuff. So that's fundamentally what I do. I'm a product person at heart, have been doing it for years. If anybody actually wants to try ProdPad, give me a shout. I'm always happy to give you a demo and give you a walkthrough. But you might know me as the person who talks about lean road mapping a lot and ditching timelines. Anybody heard me do talk on that or see me rant about why timeline roadmaps need to die? Yeah, okay. Well, let me take you back. Because I used to have really bad roadmap habits. You know, this is actually an example of one of my old roadmaps years and years ago. And you know what? It did the job at the time, right? This is what my team wanted, my bosses wanted. They wanted me to faithfully reproduce a list of things to do, all the features, and put it all in a nice little colorful Gantt chart for them. And they loved it at the time. And you know what? I wasn't the only person doing this. If you go back in time and look at what roadmap, what people saw at roadmaps, do a Google search and look up images when you look up product roadmap, and this is what you get. I mean, this is a modern one. This is still what you get. It's mostly a whole bunch of timelines. So you'd be forgiven for thinking that a product manager, particularly new ones coming in, would go, oh, well, if I have to do a roadmap, then this is what it should look like, right? So I end up delivering the same sort of assumptions on the roadmap over and over again. Now, it's the product manager, it's us, who make the roadmap, right? We're the ones who put the roadmap out and share it with everybody. But where do these bad road mapping habits actually come from? Most of the time, a lot of the time, it's coming from external pressures. It's your boss, it might be your investors, it might be your sales team, your marketing team, customers. It's people like that who are asking the product team to make these roadmaps that are full of features and promises and put pressure on us to deliver. And then when it goes wrong, they're the ones who look at us going, oh, you didn't do the roadmap right. What's going on here? We're the ones who look bad. You can understand why product manager was once listed as one of the unhappiest jobs in America. Tough out there, right? So I don't blame anyone who's become a little bit disenchanted with their roadmaps, you know, who've had their roadmaps filled with promises, but just don't quite deliver what they're expecting when they make the roadmaps. So I'm here today with one goal, and that is to change your mind about lean road mapping and OKRs, to give you talking points on getting your teams on board with this so that you can take this back tomorrow and actually start making the change in your team that you want to see. So starting next week, you're going to be more prepared than ever to give your team's product direction in a lean way. Right, are we ready?
Yeah.
Ready, all right. Now, why are roadmaps letting us down? What's wrong with these things? Well, let's have a look at a roadmap. This is a pretty classic roadmap that I'm ranting about, right? And it seems okay at first, right? Your bosses love when you give them one of these things. They give you a little pat on the head and say, good job, now go deliver. But it's setting you up for failure because if you basically deconstruct this, you get, it's like a math chart. You get time on the x-axis and then things to do on the y-axis. And it creates this timeline at the top. And it seems easy to use, especially in the short term. But the further out you go, the harder it becomes to manage. And because that timeline sits at the top, always marching forwards, everything you put on that roadmap, no matter where it sits under that timeline, always has a due date and a time estimate, just by the very format of this roadmap. So what could go wrong? Well, we know this story. You end up with made up release dates, because we all know that we're adding lots of buffer and just kind of making it up, right? And it's forcing your developers on these stressful marches to launch on time. And it's giving your sales and your customers and your marketing teams just mismanaged expectations. They don't know what you're actually going to do. And oftentimes it means that because you're focused on what you thought you were going to build at the beginning of the year, you end up missing good opportunities to go do better stuff throughout the year. And often just downright building the wrong things and building in things like tech debt and just low quality stuff because you're always rushing things out the door. And this leads to you being a sad product manager. So we don't want that. Is there a better way? Well, of course there is. This is where lean road mapping comes into play. Now, where do we get the term lean? Well, what is lean? Lean is all about the build, measure, learn. We're all familiar with lean startup and this build, measure, learn cycle. Well, the key thing about lean is really that learning part. It's so essential to the benefits of lean, and it allows you to apply your learnings to these ongoing iterations. Now, your roadmap is a tool for you to learn and iterate, but at the product strategy level. This is where it becomes really powerful. Put more succinctly, I would say that your roadmap is a prototype of your strategy. Now, what do I mean by that? Prototyping. We do it with our design teams. We've all played a hand in doing some prototyping. When you first come up with a new feature, you don't take the first thing out of your head and run over to your development team and have them go build it. Because almost certainly if you do that, you're going to end up building kind of the wrong thing, right? It's filled with assumptions. You haven't checked it with anybody. It wouldn't be right. What you do is you often sketch it out on a napkin or, draw a simple version in Figma or something like that. And then you take that prototype, that simple version, and you share it with a colleague. And you say, hey, what do you think? And you show it with the customer. And they say, what do you think? And they give you feedback. Maybe one of them says, add a button here. The other one says, change the copy there. You take that feedback on board and you throw out your first prototype and you make a new one. The value isn't in the prototype itself. That gets thrown out. You wipe that. The value is in the prototyping process. The value is in the collaboration that having this artifact, this prototype, allows you to actually have. So road mapping can be really similar. So remember, it's not your job to just know the strategy, put it on paper and then run at it. Because almost certainly it's not going to be the right strategy. It's not the most robust strategy you can come up with. A strategy, just like a feature level thing, should be checked with colleagues. It should be checked with customers. It should be checked with other people who have insights. Your job is to ask the best questions and to facilitate a really strong road mapping process as a product manager. So what you should be doing with your roadmap is taking your assumptions of where you think you are now and where you think you could be going with things to meet that ultimate product vision. And then saying, well, I think these are the steps, A, B, and C, or A, B, and D, and C, or whatever. And then your colleague or your customer or somebody would look at it and say, oh, I had a different idea. I thought it was going this way, not that way. Aha, really good you had that conversation early and didn't spend a whole bunch of time building stuff into your roadmap and building in assumptions about how you're going to work before you actually check those assumptions. So a great product manager should lead their team in a road mapping process and not just run straight forward with a roadmap. So prototyping is really key to what we do, not just at the design level, but at the product strategy level. It's really important to remember that road mapping, that building products is a completely unknown, uncharted territory. Everyone in here is building something completely unique. No one in here is building the same thing as the person next to them. No one in here is building something that has been built before. This isn't prefab house stuff. This isn't, furniture from IKEA. This is new, unique products. You don't know what the final version is supposed to look like. That's why product management is kind of hard, right? That's our job to figure out. It's a little bit landing on a new, unknown shore. and then you have to figure out where you are and then figure out where you're going. So you land on this new shore and you can see off into the distance, right? And every product here is a completely unique journey. You've all landed on new, different shores. Now, this is where the concept of time horizons come in. So you land on this new shore and you can see the stuff that's right in front of you. And you can see the stuff that's way off into the distance as well. And you can see stuff that's, you know, kind of in that middle ground as well, right? It's natural. It feels as very human relatable, right? But the things that are in front of you that are very close by that you've got grip on versus the things that are, you know, fuzzy and off into the distance. You can see there's hills in the distance, but, you know, you don't need to worry about them yet. You know, so you land on this new shore and, you know, all of a sudden there's a bear there. Like that's the first problem to solve. Regardless of whether there's a big mountain in the distance to go at, you need to deal with the bear first. And so you want to start breaking that down with your team and figure out, okay, how do we solve the bear problem? Do we fight it? Do we run? What do we do? Right? So these are the things that you have right in front of you, the problems that are super present. You can also see way off into the distance, like there might be some gold-topped hill that you know that your management team is pointing you to. That's the big, you know, we're going to go collect all that revenue from over that way, or we're going to go climb that mountain. Cool. Now, you could start breaking that down into a lot of detail. Like maybe you need warmer clothes or ice climbing gear or some tents or something to climb that mountain, but that's way too detailed. You don't need to spend your time planning for that expedition before you deal with the bear that's in front of you. You can also see off into the middle distance. There might be other opportunities, other problems, ways that you can take advantage of things that are going on in the market, just different things that you're seeing. And you know, how far you can see and how well you see and how many things you see depends on how well equipped your team is. You know, so just you and your founder going at this and you can just see like kind of a little bit, or are you a, you know, fully equipped team of dozens of product people who all have different eyes and sights on different tools and different experiences, lots of customers to give you a view as to what's going on. So how granular and how much detail, how much information goes into your roadmap depends on how well equipped you are, but that grows over time as your team becomes more mature. And there's probably multiple paths that you can take through this, right? Maybe you can get around the bear, but you have to fight the fire first. Maybe there's a bog that you can see that you want to build a bridge over, or you know, there's a city that you can hit along the way to pick up resources. There's lots of different paths you can take, and it's up to you to figure out what that best path is. But you're not going to find that best path just by standing at the front and going, yeah, we'll just go that way. The best teams are the ones who regularly regroup and say, well, here's what we can see. You know, we thought that was a problem before, but turns out it's less of a problem because this has changed. Or, you know what, we fought the bear and turns out the fire went out on its own, or whatever else, right? So you've got all these different things that you need to consider along the way. And these, it's the collaboration with your team, it's the pulling in of their insights that makes it so powerful, that makes your product management process so powerful. So these horizons translate to the product roadmap, the now, the next, and the later. So the stuff that's in the now is very granular, it's right in front of you, very high level of certainty, whereas the stuff that's in the future columns tend to be much less specific, right? The more about problems that you need to solve. You probably haven't outlined how you're going to solve them yet, and that's okay. You're setting expectations and you're setting direction for your team, and that's really important. Now, let's say you're setting off on a journey like this. Your team is probably going to start bickering right away if they don't have agreement on what good looks like, what success metrics are, what their guiding light should be. You know, after all, if you have no way of saying whether you're working on the right things, who's to say that you're working on the wrong things, right? Your team could just start scattering off into the fields and start doing whatever. You need something to give you some guidance. So this is where objectives in roadmaps comes into play and makes it really powerful. Road mapping without objectives can be chaos. But why do so many teams give up on OKRs, right? Who here is using OKRs or has used OKRs, objectives and key results? All right. And who here has given up on OKRs in the past? Yeah, right, like quite a few. We're getting kind of disenchanted with these things. And I think it's because they're being used in isolation more often than not. So to back up, what are OKRs? OKRs stands for objectives and key results. I'm not going to go into a deep dive on this because there's a lot more information, but essentially objectives are your high level qualitative success metrics, what success looks like for your business. And the key results are the specific and measurable things that you're going to measure against those key results. And usually the key results are time bound. Now, the concept of the OKRs is that they cascade, right? So the top level objective is set by the company, and then other OKRs slot into those. And the team, the magic of OKRs is that the team decides how they're going to contribute to them. So consider the opposite, which is how some of this old school management works. You get middle management saying, well, we need you to go build this many widgets or these many features or whatever, and they're not listening to the people in their team. OKRs gives the team the ability to say, well, if this is our main objective, then here's how we can contribute, and here's how we can contribute, and here's how we can contribute. And each team talks about how they can contribute to solving that overall problem at each level. And the team will now spot gaps, spot overlaps, and fix those gaps. Whereas, if you've got middle management and top management telling you what to go do, they're going to miss this stuff. OKRs allows you to use the collective knowledge of your team. After all, we're all knowledge workers, right? We're all bringing our whole brains to the company. What is a company besides a group of smart people? If you're not using those smart people for their smarts, then you're not making use of them. The best companies allow the people in their team to work together to find out how they're going to solve those problems. So OKRs really enables that. But there's a missing piece. There's a term that you might want to know in the OKR world, which is called initiatives. And it's not documented in all OKR places. You will find it in some places, but not a lot. It seems to be like the forgotten middle child. Maybe that's because oikers doesn't have a good ring to it. I don't know. Now, an initiative describes the specific activities or the projects that the team is going to be working on in order to influence the success of that OKR. So it's important to the OKRs. It's a key thing that you're doing to impact that OKR. So, even if you identify what you need to achieve, which is the objective, based on that company strategy, and determine what good looks like, which is your key results, you're not going to get very far if you're not able to clearly communicate the actions that you plan on taking in order to get there, which is the initiative. So to give you an example, let's say you want to improve your overall health so that you can avoid illness and injury. Cool, great objective. That's your objective. You might have a key results, and your key results, something specific and measurable. It might be something like lose 15 pounds by the end of the year. Cool. All right, that's a chunky goal. You're never meant to actually hit all your OKRs. Don't worry about it. It's supposed to be, a stretch goal. And for this one key result, you're not just going to lose the weight by willing it away. And I think this is where the problem with key results comes in, OKRs comes in, is that people just sort of set them and then will them away. You're not going to will it away. You need to set an initiative to, maybe introduce exercise to your schedule. Or refactor your diet and start eating well. So you might have multiple initiatives that are going to impact that OKR. Different things that you're going to do to make you do that, to help you hit that objective that you set. So really important to consider those objectives, the initiatives in your OKRs. For some reason, a lot of OKR systems miss initiatives. You have a lot of OKR systems which are sort of like these standalone tools, whether it's a spreadsheet that you've got set up to manage them, or whether it's a standalone. There are a lot of them are in feedback management, employee management tools. One of the problems that you start getting with that is what I call OKR drift. OKR drift is essentially what happens when you set up all your OKRs at the beginning of the quarter, and then you go off to your product space and you go do all your product work. And if you're doing your product work right, you're learning and you're iterating, you're doing stuff in here. But at the end of the quarter, you're asked to report on your OKRs. So you blow the dust off the OKR spreadsheet, you crack it open and you go, oh, I haven't looked at this for several months. These aren't relevant anymore. We've changed our tack. We've done things that weren't actually relevant. And so you hear teams saying things like, well, we ditched OKRs because they couldn't keep up with us. We moved too fast for OKRs. When in reality, it's that oftentimes the OKRs aren't actually in the same place that they're doing the product work. And so product work is just too easily drifting away. So a solution that ties all this together is a lean roadmap that gives you your initiatives and your objectives. So each of these blocks here is an initiative, a problem to be solved or an opportunity area, a thing that you're going to go tackle. And it's linked to a specific objective. So this is one popular configuration. You also might see something like this where it's grouped by objective. So different ways that you might want to show this off to your team, but fundamentally you're saying, here's what we know is in front of us. Here's what we know is coming up after that. And here's what's beyond that. And here's why we're doing it, the objectives. And here's what we're doing, the initiatives. And it's all displayed in one space. And the value of this roadmap format, when paired with objectives, is that it takes the focus off building features and hitting delivery dates and helps your team strive towards solving problems. Now, I know what you're all thinking. You're all on board with this here. Everyone here gets it. They're all nodding along, going, yeah, this makes sense. But you're going to have a lot of questions and pushback when you turn up on Monday with a new format of the roadmap that looks completely different than what you're showing off before, right? I get that. One of the biggest questions I get about this every day is, how do I get my team on board? The real answer is that it depends. Right? This wouldn't be a real product management meetup if there wasn't an "it depends" in there somewhere. But that's the reality. It depends on who is asking, right? We get pushback from a ton of different stakeholders. And so it depends on whether it's your boss, your investor, your customers. But I can tell you that for each of these different types of stakeholders, there are ways to convince them. There's ways to convince your boss, for example, that having a date-driven, feature-driven, timeline-driven roadmap is not making you deliver better quality, faster stuff. There's a lot of things we can push back on and prove that lean teams deliver better quality work faster. So we could take that angle with that particular stakeholder. Or perhaps it's your investor who says that they want to see what they're investing in. Well, you can push back and point out that actually they should be investing in teams who are able to prioritize and solve problems better than other teams. You're able to react better to the team. They should be investing in the team and not in the stuff that you're going to build. Otherwise, why wouldn't they just buy an agency to build that stuff rather than invest in a startup and lock them down on something that's not the right thing to build? Maybe it's your sales and marketing team, right? Your salesperson, your marketeer, they want assurance as to what's going to be put out and when. Well, there's ways to talk about how to separate the soft launch from the hard launch, get them selling the stuff that exists already and using them to help discover what could be sold next without actually selling it. Because that's the problem that we run into, is when they sell something that doesn't exist yet. Or showing your customers that you still have vision and that you're still creating value, even if you can't promise them delivery dates on what's being built. So lots of ways of working with different stakeholders and different ways of tackling their objections, regardless of what they are. So I'm not going to go into each of those now, because that could take an entire day seminar, I'm sure. But I have written this down. I wrote a guide called Ditch the Timeline Roadmap. It's a 6-page guide. So it's a bit heavy, but it talks about lean road mapping and OKRs. And the last page is dedicated to how to get your team on board, including all those different types of stakeholders and the ways that you might sort of win them over to your side. And trust me, I've seen literally hundreds of people now transfer from timeline roadmaps to lean roadmaps and find it successful. A lot of them actually just, that whole saying of it's easier to ask for forgiveness than permission. Honestly, just turn up with this new format and say, this is how product managers do it today, and it's better, and see what the objections are. You'll probably get away with it. And I know this because I've seen hundreds do it already. It's great. And I know that having examples on hand can also be such a valuable tool in getting your team on board. So we've also got this sandbox mode at ProdPad, completely free. You don't need a credit card to enter. You could just go on in, and it has example OKRs and roadmaps and experiments and ideas and feedback, and it's all linked together, so you can play with it, you can move it around, you can do whatever in there, take inspiration from it, and it'll help you form, hopefully help you form your own roadmaps as you go forwards. So with this guidance, I hope that I've helped you, at least a few of you, move away from your old roadmap habits and onto something new, a new, leaner way of working. And so with that, thank you very much. Now, I am pleased to introduce Dave Martin.
All right, first off, I just had a look on Slido. That's where you guys get to do some work for us standing up. How many questions? The Q&A at the end is going to be very boring. So before anything else, I'm going to take a photo of you lovely lot for my social. And you can post a question, please, on Slido. You must have a question for James and Jana so far, I'm sure. So come on, get a question up there, please. The minute there's one, that's not good enough. Is that a big enough cloak, Ben? Yeah. There we go. Sorry. So I'm Dave Martin, I'm founder of Right to Left. And basically that means I spend most of my day being a product leader coach. And that means I work with founders and product leaders to help them improve their product organizations and help them make better decisions and help them grow and scale their business. And that's the bit we're going to talk about today, the scaling side. But before I do, I just want to understand who you guys are, because I could take this conversation a few different routes depending who's in the room. And what I really want to know is job titles. So do me a favor, if you're a product manager or a product owner or an APM, any of those type of roles, you're an individual contributor in the ground doing the actual work, you put your hand up. Cool, most of you. Awesome. What about if you're a product leader, head of, VP, whatever title you might have, director, put your hand up. A few of you. Some design people in the room? Cool, any marketeers? Anyone didn't put their hand up? What do you do, sir?
Marketing.
Marketing. Fantastic. Any other marketeers? Anyone else left? No, we're good. Brilliant. I've got a good idea who you all are. Thank you. My talk is a little bit two-way. You've got to speak back. And we're going to start off. Oh dear, I'm not good with this clicker. There's a delay. There we go. We're going to start off with a little bit. It'll almost feel like therapy. Group therapy. We can do it together. I want to start off thinking about prioritization. You're all involved with it in some way. If you're in marketing, you might be having to trying to influence it. If you're product leaders, you're trying to cultivate and having sure your teams can do it. And if you're product managers, that's kind of your job. So I'd like to understand the frustrations you have. Just shout them out. What frustrations? Come on, be brave. You've all had a beer out there, so you can speak out. Let me hear. What are the frustrations you have with prioritization?
Leadership drift.
Leadership.
Just using the word earlier.
Leadership drift. I like that. That's nice. That's cool. Leadership drift. Basically, they change their minds all the time, I guess. What else?
Full of assumptions.
Full of assumptions. Loads of assumptions. Cool. Okay, keep them coming. Come on. Come on.
Bit hard to kind of, like have this matrix, important versus urgent, Something is important, non-important, urgent, and non-urgent. So how to figure out something is important as well as urgent.
Right. Yeah. Hard to actually evaluate. Yeah. Nice. Hard to get data on it. Awesome.
Competing priorities.
Competing priorities. That's great. What was that, Ben?
Overcoming pet projects.
Overcoming pet projects. Yeah. Yeah. How to not be biased as well. Cool. We've got a few. What else?
Lack of resources.
Lack of resource. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I'm sure. I don't think there's anybody as and stuff like that thing. Doesn't matter how big your company is. You've never got enough of you.
Misaligned goals.
Misaligned goals. Love it. Awesome. Tech debt. Look at this. You're warming up now, Mark.
Unreliable sales forecasts.
Unreliable sales forecasts. Great, excellent. What about
delivery forecasts?
from the sales company? What's the what about fears? So these are the pains you suffer. What are your fears? What are you worried about getting wrong? What's the fear?
Prioritizing the wrong thing.
Prioritizing the wrong thing. Great. Yeah. Yeah. Spank the money at the wall. Yeah. What else?
What if we're held to it?
What if we're held to it? Yeah. The commitment. Yeah. Any other fears?
Too late.
Someone said something I can't hear.
Being too late.
Being too late. Yeah. Not being able to deliver on time. Yeah. I'm trying to do everything. Prioritizing everything. Yeah. So that's awesome. Any more? No. We'll move on. I prepared a few in case you and I had already had a beer and we're all really quiet. The ones I see a lot with companies is I see everyone's going in a different direction. No one agrees what direction we're going in. You often have a product strategy and you've all agreed it at some point and presented some slides, but everybody walked out of the room with different ideas of what that actually meant. And when it comes to execution, they all go in different directions. We'll get used to this quicker. We get distracted a lot. Shiny thing over here, let's go play with that. That might be, we get distracted to the product manager level or the engineering level, nice new piece of tech. Let's play with that. Or it might well be our leadership have read a book and thought we should do this new thing. Oh, I'm sure you've all experienced that. We get distracted pretty easily. And the other is, especially I work with product leaders mainly. We're very good at thinking we're delivering strategy and guiding our teams when actually we're delivering solution. We're very good at leaders dictating solution by mistake, which is, to John's point, complete waste of time. Hiring all the, what was your phrase? Hiring all the smarts, not letting them be smart. Yeah. Pretty much that. Let's go back to the prioritization bit. Let's go to the more fun side. Although this is normally the harder side. How do you want it to be? What's your wants? Instead of frustration, what would you want great be? What would you like it to be like?
To be betting on the right thing.
You want to be betting on the right thing. I love that. Yeah. Picking the winning bets. What else?
Prioritizing problems.
Prioritizing problems. Lovely. Alignment. Yeah, that'd be great, wouldn't it?
Be left alone.
To be left alone. Let me get on with it. For goodness sake. Any more? Trust. To be trusted. Yeah, I love that word. Trust. Awesome. That's all. Which one? Done. You have to get done. Yeah. Any more? What about our aspirations? That's actually normally easier.
Making stakeholders happy.
Happy stakeholders, right? Cool.
Driving the right outcomes.
Delivering the right outcomes. Lovely.
Exit.
Exit. Yeah, definitely. If you're in the kind of business. Most of us here are probably in some form of startup, get an exit. Yeah.
Knowing we delivered the right stuff.
Yeah, knowing we actually made the right decisions, even better.
Leading the competition.
Leading the competition. Lovely. So I came up with a few as well. I like the idea of product development and locking customer value. It's quite interesting, actually. Nobody mentioned the customer just. I think that's because we talked about pains first and biased you to that. Typically, your customer isn't always your biggest pain. Ironically, it's the internal stakeholders causing you the pain. We want our customers to be happy. We want to unlock value for them. If we don't unlock value for the customer, I have no idea why they're going to pay us any money. And we definitely won't get the exit gentleman mentioned. Unsolved problems that really matter to customers. Somebody mentioned outcomes. Louise, you said outcomes. That's the opposite. An outcome is a problem inverted. We want problems that actually matter. And ideally, and John has really touched on this for the objectives and OKRs, about we want to empower teams to be able to build amazing products. And if we're product leaders, that means we've got to give the right guidance. So some mistakes I see a lot. Checking time, I'm good, it's all right. The mistakes I see regularly is I see that we act too tactically. We need to forget our strategy. Our product strategy we said we deliver, how we think we're going to create value for our customers and for our business and create enterprise value at the end. it often gets lost in execution. We get caught up in all the problems of the day-to-day and all the BAU and all the complaints and bugs and sales selling something you haven't built and all the other problems that normally get raised. We end up really tactical, and that's a problem. And worse still, we end up tactical by mistake. We end up prioritizing tactical things over strategic things without knowing it. It's all right to play tactics, they have a role. It's not all right to play them by mistake. The biggest mistake I see is we fail to define what value actually means. If your product strategy doesn't define how you are going to create value, it's missing the point. We need to understand that we need to get rid of the ambiguity from the phrase value. When you look at two different items for prioritization, if we can make up what value means for each, it's easy for whoever can articulate value the best to make that prioritization case and win. That doesn't mean it was the right strategic value for you as a company. What it means is those people who can articulate value the best are more likely to influence more than anyone else. And the best people articulating value, if they're good at their job, are salespeople and marketers. Because that's their job, to articulate value. If they can't, then they can't do their job. I know I've said it already, but I can't say it enough, which is why it appears again. Strategy is not the solution in this order. That is not a strategy. That is your decision of how you're going to implement the strategy. There are lots of opportunities how you'll do that. So working with Andrea Sayers, we've come up with a solution to help with this. We've come up with a tool, and we call it the Product Value Creation Plan. And I haven't got time in 10 minutes and 54 seconds to explain how to build this and use this tool in full. But I have a white paper so that you can download that later and read how to do it. Instead, I'll introduce it to you now. So if you want to grab the white paper, it also means you're not going to take any notes and you won't forget anything I said because it's all in the white paper. Grab the white paper, that'd be handy. We're going to talk about why we need the product VCP and where it fits. And then very quickly, a bit of how you do it, what it looks like. And then the white paper, you can knock yourself out at a time or go to our website right to death with a load of free content. Some videos, there's an hour-long video on how to do this, so you can go do it yourself. So the first thing, if we just zero back to when your product gets started. For some of you, that's inside a large corporate, it's a new product line, a new initiative. For others of you, it's a startup. We'll go with the latter, it's easier for the illustration. And the founding team, whoever they are, they believe they've discovered a problem. And they believe this, with their entrepreneurial flair, that it's a problem that's valuable and worthwhile solving. And they start to solve it. There's normally quite a small team, and communication is super high, and all the implied assumptions and values, they're well understood because it's such a small team. It's only when the team gets bigger those things become confusing. And they iterate, and they follow pretty much a good product playbook, often without knowing anything about product, and it's just common sense. And when it's a small team, it's easy to do. And at some point, they get traction, and they start to feel like, hey, we should do this thing bigger. I can make more money. Let's do it. And typical route would be to go get funding, go get investment. What happens at that stage when we go and get investment is that we want to grow quicker. We've got this money now, we can scale. We start the scale up journey. Now, often that journey looks something, instead of like going deeper in the vertical I'm already in that target niche where I found product market fit, where my product market fit is strong, because product market fit is not binary. You don't have it or not have it. It's relative. It was really strong in that small niche. And I've started to expand my organization, my market. It can still be within the same target market, it's just a wider niche. And what typically happens is that market fit is not as strong with that wider niche. And our sales cycle gets slower. Our retention might get harmed. Things don't go quite how we want. Normally, unfortunately, too often, our solution to this at the founder level and leadership level is let's go even wider. And at that point, at the edges there, where that niche has got bigger, we're even lower market fit. And our sales cycle gets even slower, and our ACV goes lower, and our retention, except it all goes to shit. We call this the product momentum gap. I'll just draw it a different way for you, because some of you like graphs. I didn't think any of you were financial people. When I did this to Frog Capital yesterday, they got very excited when we put graphs on. So a graph for you. There's no CFOs here today. We went through that journey of getting traction. We got to that investment point or scale point. We start to then have our ambition for that hockey stick growth. There's no investment deck that goes, we're going to increase year on year by 10%. It's always this hockey stick. And what happens? Well, typically we end up on that average growth. We're a bit disappointed. It's not going quite to plan. That's the product momentum gap. And a very important point about the product momentum gap, there is a point of no return down that average growth road. You go too far down that line, you go to a point where you'll never be able to come back and get back to a good place. That's because you've ended up with some high value customers, with some custom code, with a heap of tech debt, with all these problems. And to fix it, to get those problems out of your business, effectively low value, low profit, it might be high revenue, but low profit clients, get them out of your business means dropping your revenue considerably. And you can't sell that to the investors. No one's going to do that. That's not how business works. So there is a point of no return. We've got to fix this before we hit that. So what would great look like? Well, the opposite way, the better way, is to empower you guys, the product people, that when you expand, to understand and learn about that wider niche problem, to not drink our own Kool-Aid and hype from our investment process, where we believe we're the best thing since sliced bread, and recognize that actually we don't fit everybody perfectly, and understand the challenges that exist, and go and learn about those customer problems, and iterate like we did before, and get a stronger product market fit, at which time we see retention improve, sales cycles shrink, etc., and the world gets healthier. Then repeat it to the broader process and get growth. What's that look like on the graph? Instead of going on an average growth, that helps us on the green curve because there's more chance. It's not going to achieve that on its own. I'm not going to pretend that product on its own, we nail product. That doesn't mean you're definitely going to get exponential growth. There's plenty of other stuff for you to get very wrong in an organization. Marketing, distribution channels, pricing, hiring, all those other things. But if all those other things are right and product's wrong, you're still going to fail. And this bit's your job, so it's relevant. So how do we fix this? 4 minutes and 30 seconds to explain the product VCP to you. Let's have a go. So I did this last week. It took 4 hours in a workshop. Did it yesterday, an hour and a half, 20 minutes today. So let's go. When you come up with your business strategy, and then you have a product strategy to deliver your business strategy, to achieve those goals, the two things are separate, they're not the same. We're very good at coming up with the value assumptions here. Value assumptions about how do my company goals, the things I want, what value do I have to give the customer for me to get what I want? We're really good at articulating that. Mainly it's our buyer persona in B2B software. We understand what our buyers care about, and we want it because we won't get the sale without it. And we worry about how we're going to, we think we align that to our company goals. We're quite good at articulating that. Unfortunately, that's really hard for us to impact the product directly. Because in product, I hate to share it, but in reality, all we ever do is release features that change user behavior. That's what we do. We can't do anything else. That's it. Thankfully, when we change those user behaviors, it creates value for the business, our customers, and they pay us, our company, money for that value. But very rarely do we talk about that second assumption, the assumption around what's the user behavior we've got to change to create the customer value. We miss that bit out. We leave that bit very implicit. And that's where everyone gets misaligned. Everyone has a different idea of what right is there, and what good might be, and what our plan is. So that's actually how we should be articulating the product strategy at a high level, not micro. Makes sense? It's just nods, if not shake, and I'll try and explain it differently. Cool. How might we express that part that's harder to think about, that we don't normally do? Well, the way we've been doing this with probably 30, 40 clients now is we've expressed it by diving into what's that value of the other page, customer value in the middle, that goes on the end. What's the user behavior and how we're modifying it to create that value? We explore that at length and we validate it, and we don't do it on our own, we do it collaboratively with the business, and we do it with research and data, all the way back to James's talk with the qual and quant data. We're going to use that to help us inform this. We're not going to just make it up in a broom cupboard. Once we've understood these things and explored this at length, we prioritize and decide which things we actually care about. Which of these matter to us? Which of these are we going to put our bets on? And that's a different way of articulating a shorter term product strategy. And by the shorter term, I mean 12 months, maybe longer, depending on the size of the org and what you do. We can articulate our product strategy and agree it with our leadership. Then if our leadership agree this, our stakeholders agree on this, then we can come up with indicators, value indicators, to measure that behavior. That then gives us a metric that product teams can actually impact when they release software. A metric they can see change that's a strategic value. They know if they change that metric in the right direction, they're generating value towards our strategy. Instead of a lag metric like pounds, which for a B2B software that sells multi-year contracts with a 12-month sales cycle is impossible for a product manager to measure. Instead, now we're saying we've assumed this is how we create value. This is our strategy, how we create value. We now know how we measure it. And we can get this down to 7 or 8 metrics. And that's the product value creation plan. We now have something for the product leader to be accountable for in strategy meetings, in board meetings, depending on what level you're at. Something to help shape and frame our objectives and key results. And we know we can then make decisions every day at a strategic level, whilst not actually talking about the high level strategy, talking about the granular thing we can impact. 22 minutes on the dot. So we have a bunch of tools to help you build these things. Loads. If we were running a workshop, we'd go through them all. Like yesterday at SaaS Doc, we went through every single one and help people have a go at building a VCP in the room. Not for them to use because it was on their own, obviously, just to learn the process and get a feel for the tools. You can go on our website, get all this stuff. It's all free. It's all there. It'll soon be in a book that me and Andrea are writing, and you can buy that. Hopefully this was helpful, gave you a different way of thinking about things. What other people that have done it have said. These are other product leaders' quotes, not mine. And that's it. I've run out of time. I've come to the end. Just appreciate it.
Folks, we're going to call it. It's a wrap. There's a couple of drinks outside left for anyone that wants to have a little bit of a chat. Just one last thing. Myself and Seema and Ben are going out on a limb, and we're going to have a Christmas party. It's a BYOB now. We're not no sponsorship in this. And a BYOC, bring your own cash. But we're going to let the Meetup crew know that we're going to be in a pub on a certain night, and we'd love you all to come and join us, and let's just talk about product and have a Christmas party. So we love you.
And the grass where you lay left a bed in your shape. I looked over it and I ached. I love everybody because I love you. I don't need the city and I don't need the proof. All I need, darling, is a life in your shape. I picture it soft and I ache. Look at you, strawberry blonde. Reach out the car window, trying to hold the wind. You tell me you love her, I give you a grin. Oh, all I ever wanted was a life in your shape. So I